Okay, hey, welcome to another episode of On the Restroom Off the Cuff. Today we have a really fun wild card watch to review from BOMBERG. They're an independent Swiss luxury lifestyle brand, and they are definitely their aesthetic is very tied to tattoo art. In terms of a wild card watch, some key common characteristics and design language when you're looking for something to kind of fill that space. It's you're really gonna want that kind of eccentric and sometimes even over the top styling. For a real standout piece, right, within a collection. This isn't going to be anybody's one singular watch. This is going to be, somebody's third, fourth, fifth, or 12th or 20th watch within a collection. Kind of like exotic cars. There's really probably not too many guys where they're only driving their one Lamborghini. Chances are, if they have one, they probably have a stable of automobiles, and one of them is going to be the daily, and one of them is going to be that fun weekend car. And the wild card watch kind of is that statement piece when it comes to anyone's collection. I'd say it's kind of equal parts conversation piece as well as timepiece. This is the BB-01 automatic Dia de los Muertos, and it's a tribute to the Day of the Dead. With this very unique dial, case, and strap design details that we'll get into. So this thing is, it's not typical to what you would see on the channel, guys, but the level of fit and finish on here is pretty amazing. The tricks that they've done in terms of the way that this crystal is integrated and the way that it just... this thing's impressive. I know the aesthetic might not be for everyone, it's probably not for everyone. We'll even take it there. But if I was going to a Day of the Dead festival, this would be the watch for it. And there's actually one annually where I live. There's a really old mission. It's beautiful in Oceanside. This might be what's going to be on my wrist. And I think from a watchmaking execution perspective, there's a lot to appreciate here. So excited to share this one with you guys. Let's zoom the camera out, get this piece in hand, and take a closer look. All right, so first of all, I couldn't lay it flat, so I have it on this watch stand, which I will now pull out of frame. All right. So check this out, guys. Yes, yeah, it's a lot. When you just saw this, you were like, wow, that's a lot. But then you see this and it's just like, okay, next level. There's bling there. Swarovski crystals. Yes, they are in the band, and that's wild. But look at this case. Look at that crystal. It's a bezel-less design, and the crystal is basically kind of capped over the edge there, and the execution on that is just gorgeous. Look at the chamfer on this lug. Look at the construction of the lug. It's actually a separate piece. It's bolted on underneath, right? And then you still have all the beautiful ornate details and engraving, as well as a very sporty, large, easily accessible crown. But it is also placed in a way that it's not going to dig into your wrist or anything like that. So a lot of form and function. But check this out, guys. Look at that. It's just really beautifully done. Really sturdy in terms of the brushing, the fit, the finish, nice and thick with very tight tolerances. This is an impressive piece. From this angle, I could really, if they tried to just dress this down, let's say they flipped it and they made maybe they put the crown, I think I'd prefer it maybe over here, but I think up there is still cool. And they just turned this into a very traditional watch. Let's say they just and they made this into like a modern sector dial, so you could still, because it's an all dial setup, you would still be able to fill the space. Holy smokes, that would be amazing. And then all this stuff, let's say they got rid of all, which I don't know if they have to, but let's say they turn that into something like just some knurling, right? Some diamond style pattern. This is a watch that is insanely impressive, just from what they're an execution standpoint. And then, no, it's not cheap. It's Swiss made. It's got so many pieces to it and so much complexity. This is 1795, so under $2,000. But considering what you get, not at all surprised by the price. I think there's probably cheaper versions of something like this, but that will be noticeably cheaper and actually probably feel cheap. This does not feel cheap. I mean, I understand, again, styling in terms of aesthetics, not for everybody, but there's so many great things that they do. So this diameter on here is actually a 43.5 millimeter diameter, but it actually wears really well because of these really short stubby lugs. And again, look at the finishing, the transition brushed to high polished. I mean, it's hard to argue with that. And then the height is only 13.9, and that's including that high domed, beautiful sapphire crystal. My gosh, this might be one of the best sapphires ever on the channel. I mean, this thing is a work of art, but I mean, it's kind of goes with the theme. The whole thing is kind of a work of art. But the mid case itself is only about 8 millimeters thick, guys. 8 millimeters. That is special. That's exciting. The lug to lug is 48.8. Stainless steel, brushed, great engravings and everything like that. You can see there's just multiple layers to this dial, colors, shapes, patterns. There's just a lot to love. In terms of just some of the more standard specs, guys, high domed sapphire with AR coating, bezel-less design, non-screw down crown, but it is signed. It does have a Swiss-made Sellita SW200 movement in it, so they did not cheap out in terms of getting you a nice 4 hertz sweep, 8 ticks per second. And of course, it's Swiss-made, so it's going to be very tough, and what you would expect behind kind of those very strong words. Now, in terms of actually, let's get into the case back really quick. It is screw in versus screw down, but it does the job. But one of the nice things is you can see that this is a display case back. It has some nice engravings on there. 5 atmospheres or 50 meters of water resistance, which is great. Then you get to the real star of the show here, and you can see the way that the light plays. There's a vertical brushing on the skull section, which is catching and capturing light differently. Then you have the roses, around the outer portion. Then you also do have some really cool, like, see-through cutouts that go underneath where the webbing is on either flank of kind of the skull's cheeks. And man, it's just a very cool, like, again, multi-dimensional. This thing has a lot going on, but it also has a lot going for it. Again, this isn't a Rolex Explorer. This isn't a Speedmaster. This is far from the professional go anywhere and do anything type of watch. This is absolutely it's a watch made for a rebel by a group of a bunch of rebels. So I don't know, I just really get a kick out of it, and I'm happy to share it with you guys. The lugs are 22 millimeters. And then again, they are kind of bolted on. They're not part of the case. They are kind of put together, which I think is a nice little detail. And then you do get a very subtle taper from 22 down to 20 millimeters on the taper in terms of width. And then in terms of thickness, you're getting about 6 millimeters down to a 3.5 millimeter taper as well. So that absolutely will bode well for comfort on the wrist. And then, of course, the beautifully milled, fully brushed deployant buckle there, which is very, very nice, well done, and just handsome. I mean, it's hard to argue with it. I mean, if you look at it from this angle, I mean, without all the crazy stuff on it, and you just hear the specs and you just see the silhouette. I mean, this is a watch that I could see a lot of people. I mean, I might have to talk to BOMBERG and just be like, yeah, let's also do like a, but I don't know, that might be like so against the grain for them to do like a traditional sector dial. That might just really upset them, if I was to tell them that I think that that could probably sell like hotcakes. But at the same time, there's plenty of places you can go buy, you know, something that looks plain that can be versatile and be worn for kind of any occasion. This watch is an occasion. It's an occasion on the wrist. So let's actually get it on the wrist and see how it wears. All right, guys, as you can see on my 7.5-inch wrist, this thing wears really nice. Again, look at that profile. Look at the way it sits. Look at the way it just catches the light. This isn't even like a low light transition situation, but look at the just, there's so much going on. There's so much play. You're getting, you know, ornate detailing around the jewels, the crystals. You're getting multiple layers, different textures between glossy, brushed, transparent. It's just a lot to look at, and a lot to kind of feast for the eyes. I mean, it's just such a fun piece again. And honestly, so many of, you know, those really iconic watches that really people lust after, you can wear and like nobody would ever notice. This is absolutely a watch that you wear and people are going to notice, and you know, they might think you're a little wild, but they definitely aren't going to think that you bought this piece by accident. They're going to know that you're really into something special, something that stands out. It's a real, again, an absolute statement piece. And man, it just makes me I mean, you know, again, my tastes are a little bit more tame. It just makes me think of like, wow, what could they produce if they were doing something just a touch more tame? Like, what, I mean, let's maybe even make this a skeleton dial, right? That's still pretty wild and traditional. So maybe instead of a skull's face, maybe you do a skeletonized setup in terms of a dial, and you just make it a little bit more sporty, versus you know, the as highly themed. Look at the way, look at the way these crystals, the Swarovski crystals in here that are beautifully inset. Look at the way they catch the light. It's like lights off, lights on. That's cool. I don't know. There's just something. It's dazzling. It's a dazzling watch on the wrist. But let's get it off the wrist. Do some loom shots, because this does have loom, so it is practical from that perspective. Loom shots, the light transition, and closing thoughts. Okay, let's go ahead and hit the lights. As you can see, nice loom, right? Well applied, and it does the job. But you know, this isn't some toolish diver. This is something totally different. So I think the low light transition here is going to really expose a lot of different angles, a lot of different textures in terms of the way that the light will catch and play off of this dial. This beautiful deployant strap there, and you can see the way the light comes off of those crystals. My goodness, this is just something special. So I do, of course, like to do the low light transition, just because you're not always going to be out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight. A lot of times you're going to find yourself in, you know, less than optimal lighting, mixed lighting conditions. And this watch, for as busy as it is, it's still quite legible. When you kind of blur your eyes, you can see that the upper quadrant is going to be with the red, lower with the black. So there's like a lot of visual landmarks that go into this that maybe you don't even notice, and you know, from afar. But it's pretty cool. I mean, those eyes are quite piercing. It would have been cool if those glowed. I think that would have been a very nice touch. But again, this is like where you get more into the functional side. Like, they just made sure that it was a great timekeeping piece from that perspective. Even if I get into some very harsh lighting conditions here, you can see the brushing is really nicely done on those lugs. That high polished surfaces as well, and accents, really, really nice. That beautiful sapphire, that is something special. I mean, look at the way the light just dances off of this piece. It is really something to behold. Look at the way, as I just kind of circulate here, look at the way those crystals play with the light as well. So there's just a lot to enjoy. It's a lot of fun. And yes, it is a themed watch, and yes, it is a wild card. It's eccentric, it's polarizing, but it's a lot of fun. And man, again, I'm really pleasantly surprised by the level of craftsmanship that went into this piece. So although the aesthetic isn't like, again, it's not a watch that I would design, but I can absolutely appreciate everything that went into this piece. And I could see this being in a watch box with a bunch of very serious and professional and grown-up watches, and this being that fun one that, like, you pop open the watch box and people will grab this instead of that, those pieces that everybody knows and everybody covets, and that's great. But this is just, I don't know, there's something that it's just cool, and I enjoy it. But let me know what you guys think. Closing thoughts here on the wrist. Very short and stubby lugs help shrink that case down. And then the way that the lugs are really situated at the bottom of the case help it wear really well, hug the wrist well. It's impressive. In terms of model variants, definitely check the site for new releases and availability. They do have some other variants, and hey, maybe when you're watching this in the future, they might have some, watch that looks a little bit more just like a classic sports watch, but with some really interesting, design features and facets. Wow. I mean, I just look at this and I just see it as this amazing platform, just because of the lug execution, the case, the crystal, the choice of the Swiss movement, the beautiful milling on that very solid and hefty deployment buckle. I mean, I just see so much potential for something that might be, I would say, again, definitely not quite status quo, because I know that, like, BOMBERG would never want to do that. But yeah, this watch isn't for everyone, but that's by design. It's all by design. This is a standout look from a rebellious brand, and the level of detailing can be appreciated by anyone across the collecting spectrum. Like, it doesn't matter what you buy and what you like, there's something impressive here. This thing has so much going on, and you might not love the way it all comes together, but those little details, those little touches, those little points and showcases of finesse are really quite impressive, and there's a lot to enjoy, whether at a glance or on the wrist for a day or two. So with that said, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. If you like the video, please do hit like, and if you haven't already, please do subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.